Welcome to Sonic Subcultures Season 1. I'm one of your hosts, Safa Hachi. Over this series, we'll look at 9 records that represent the range of musical styles that fall under the nu metal banner. Each record represents an aspect of nu metal that's surprisingly finding itself back in the current music landscape. Considering I'm late to the game, I'm wondering how nu metal is back and why. To find some answers, Marc, Lajeunesse, and I look back at each record, do a deep dive on the content of the record such as its form, lyrics, and impact. And from there, with the help of our differing perspectives, we piece together what each record means now in the present day. Today, Deftones, Around the Fur. I've been using Spotify Wrapped since 2016, back when Spotify Wrapped first became a thing. Every year my Wrapped followed a similar pattern, accurately reflecting my music taste. A mix of rock, hip-hop, R&B, and the occasional pop track, but in 2022 something changed. There it was, sitting in the number 1 spot, Deftones, ahead of my usual lineup, Lana Del Rey, Tyler the Creator, Radiohead, Kendrick, all the other usual suspects. I didn't even realize how much the band had impacted me until I saw the proof staring back at me. Looking back now though, it made sense, as they had been flooding social media feeds recently. I had also embraced the love for nu metal and the aesthetic choices that came with it upon discovering Deftones that year. As much as I mock Gen Z for needing to aesthetically represent their interests, I can't pretend I'm not guilty of it too. I've always loved rock, but the first time I heard the drum hits in My Own Summer Shove It, I knew it would become a personality trait of mine. The slow, sensual singing, the buildup of the catchy guitar riff, the eruption into heavier vocals. It was simple, beautiful, and transformative, and at 19, it felt like a moment of discovery. Now I laugh at how much it shaped me, but back then it felt like finding who I wanted to be, and it still stands true today. Later, as Deftones got more popular, the essence of the band was all over my timeline. Seeing Deftones dominate TikTok reminded me of how the art ho phase, pastels, sunflowers, Rex Orange County, and Claro, had a similar cultural grip from 2019 to early 2021. It's not to say that these aesthetics or artists went out of style, but seeing darker aesthetics, heavier sounds, and edgier elements be what's in was what shocked me, especially in contrast to what had been trending for the past couple of years. While I have personal reasons for finding myself drawn to the aesthetic and genre, my communication studies brain couldn't help but wonder what were the broader cultural reasons. To me, this shift wasn't another trend cycle, but more of a cultural reset. The genre is heavier, it's messy, contradictory, and unapologetic, everything Gen Z is striving to become now. Our generation thrives on individuality while constantly navigating trends, and nu metal fits perfectly into this, hated just enough to feel cool and known just enough to feel seen. To me, Deftones is at the center of this resurgence. The band encapsulates everything that makes nu metal's comeback so fascinating. But it also raises important questions. What does it mean to embrace a genre that was once mocked for being too much? How do Deftones thrive in a space where music isn't just listened to but worn, performed, and turned into a lifestyle? This isn't just a conversation about nu metal, it's a reflection of Gen Z's search for meaning, identity, and connection in a world where authenticity is constantly commodified. Deftones might just be the key to understanding why nu metal is having its moment again, so stick around because we've got a lot to unpack. So, Deftones. I feel like they're kind of the reason that we're sitting here together discussing nu metal, honestly. Like, I'll kind of attribute that to them.
I agree.
Yeah, most of like the information that I do have on them though is like fully past 2010, just like how they've been interpreted, how they've kind of been thrown back into our scene. But we've kind of talked about how, like, you know, you are a fan, you've seen them live, you know,
Yeah.
So I want to know everything from your perspective from back then, and then we can jump into what they mean to us today.
Yeah, absolutely. So to situate Deftones in like the era that we're talking about so far, which is like mid to late 90s, early 2000s, what was Deftones? Well, Deftones was the band that stood out. It was the band that everyone in a band respected, if didn't outright like. And as time passed, they were the nu metal band that was still okay to listen to. because they didn't really fit in and they didn't get gaudy in the same way that Korn and Limp Bizkit and all these associated acts, like even your Disturbeds, your Godsmacks, these kind of became like cookie cutter. They became so lived in the tropes of nu metal, and every Deftones record really changed. And I think the only Deftones record that really sounds like a nu metal record is the first one. And the one we're talking about today, Around the Fur, has this bridging moment where they're already deciding, well, we're going to include all our influences. We're going to write music for ourselves. And then for their next record, White Pony, they've completely left nu metal behind, except as like a base foundation and the scene that they're playing music in. So, yeah, that's really what they were. And I think they were also inspirational for a lot of like young musicians, which I was at the time when I was getting into Deftones around 1999, 2000, 2001. So I started getting into Deftones right before White Pony came out. So they had already been established for many years, because I think Adrenaline came out in like 95, Around the Fur 97.
Yeah.
And then White Pony, I think, is 2000, 2001, around that time. And so they were already kind of telling young musicians that you don't just have to copy the thing that you're hearing. If you like a bunch of weird different bits of music, you can incorporate that in. And that's especially true for like spacey stuff, for a lot of air, which nu metal is not known for. There is not a lot of dynamic space in nu metal. There's not a lot of breathing room except in Deftones. And that's what really set them apart, is that these are songs where you can let the music breathe, and somehow the magic of Deftones is that it is heavy as all hell, even with all that space. And so that's what I would start with in terms of what Deftones was. And then they were also the thing that you're mainly going to talk about today. And they have somehow maintained this reputation, probably not from Adrenaline in 1995, but from Around the Fur to 2025. So that's a good 28 years.
Yep. I think it's really interesting that you bring up that the band was kind of the only one left that was like okay to listen to, because that also kind of translates into like the whole nu metal resurgence, because that is the band that kind of kick-started it all. I won't say that like people weren't listening to like Korn and Limp Bizkit and all the other ones, but I would say that like the commercial success of Deftones on social media really did kind of skyrocket the aesthetics of it, like the bringing back the trends, even being able to discover the other bands. So I think it is interesting that that kind of has stayed similar for the band.
To sum it up, I would say Deftones has a quality beyond just the rage and the meme of the anger. There's something that let it persist and that let me carry a record like Around the Fur with me through my entire musical journey, through jazz and fusion and all the stuff I learned how to do. Again, always loving metal the whole time, but like I didn't take Limp Bizkit and Korn with me, but Deftones was always on the playlist. The record we're talking about today, again, I told you before the podcast, I've probably heard it upwards of 250 times. And that's probably like, I heard it for the first time in like 1998. That's almost as long as it's been around, right? And so every year I put this thing on like 3-4 times a year. And Deftones is one of the only bands from this genre. It's actually one of the only bands with English language lyrics I can listen to while I'm doing other work and writing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And I mean, like this album was also the one that kind of, that I mentioned in the intro, brought my, shifted my Spotify Wrapped. I had 2 out of the 5 like top song spots be from this album specifically. I think it was Die the Flu and Be Quiet and Drive Far Away. So like I remember it being like, this is the moment. And like you said, like just them being able to kind of like mix and match like a bunch of genres is what keeps them so relevant, and people can like them without necessarily sticking to the metal subgenre, which I feel like at least my generation is kind of scared to kind of just commit to one culture.
Yeah. So yes, the record we're listening to today is Deftones Around the Fur. And here is a review. This is the original review that Kerrang did, written by Paul Brannigan of Deftones Around the Fur, 1997. If anger is indeed an energy, as that flame-haired king of sneer, John Lydon, that's Johnny Rotten, Sex Pistols, would have us believe, then we might as well abolish British nuclear fuel and start investing in the Deftones right now. The Sacramento Quartet are the tightest wound ball of sound and fury in modern metal, one huge setting burst of pure distilled rage, which is interesting because that's not really what we're thinking of them as now. Listening to their fabulous debut album, Adrenaline felt like being dragged down a side street and beaten soundly around the head with baseball bats. That I agree with.
Well,
now, with Around the Fur, vocalist Chino Marino and company are upping the aggro even further, reaching into the back pockets for flick knives and thumb screws just for fun. Resistance is futile. Again, not really what I think of when I think about this record. It's not always clear what exactly Chino is railing against on Around the Fur. I disagree, which we'll get into. His vocals are submerged under lashings of snarling guitar, and the man himself sounds as if he's foaming at the mouth. But like Korn's Jonathan Davis, you know that even when Chino is saying nothing, he's saying something. Venomous words tripping over themselves as they surge between his lips. And you won't hear a better vocal performance all year as the whispering, shrieking Chino takes you on a roller coaster ride in and out of his personal hell. It was given a positive rating by Kerrang, which again, often rare for new metal records at the time. And I think this has maintained the review, though I think the quality of the record and what Deftones stands for has certainly changed over time. And sure. Maybe this is our segue into your core theme of today's episode. Which is,
well, the core theme, honestly, is the fact that there is no theme to Deftones. Like, so to real music nerds listening, maybe, and especially you, like, it might seem like a stretch or maybe even an insult, but I did think it was worth like bringing up. So like, we know the term indie stems from independent, you know, it's a deliberate move away from mainstream constraints. But like, even Deftones have been like open about how they don't really like to fit the new metal label. So I feel like it did kind of like mix and match. But I've noticed that like our generation are kind of like recycling trends, you know, like we've gone through the 70s, the 80s, now we're kind of in the 90s, early 2000s. And I feel like as the years are going by, like we're getting into the 2010s a bit, but we're still kind of wanting to bring these older trends with us. 2025 hits and all over Twitter, people are talking about bringing back indie sleaze. And indie sleaze was like, it wasn't even that long ago, honestly. It was in 2017. And it's this like raw, messy, kind of like, imagine being hungover in like Designer. Like it's very like British vibes. Like it's just a mess.
Like a PBR house party, but you're in nice clothes.
Literally. Yeah, literally. Like it's sex and rock and roll, but it's weird and it's, you know, it's those vibes. But anyways, I feel like it does fit with this whole new metal thing of like being like rejecting polish and embracing authenticity. Even past this, Deftones have been popular since 2021 on TikTok, and for TikTok, how fast trends move, like that's really, really impressive for them, honestly.
There's also another dynamic to Deftones that keeps their appeal up, which was true at the time, and somehow this is the thing that is probably most confounding to me at this very moment, which is Deftones was always the sexy new metal band, which in 1997, when our options were quite limited, particularly in terms of heavy music. And so Deftones easily steps up as like, okay, this is aesthetic, it's airy, there's a certain kind of romance and eroticism to Deftones. And they certainly started marketing themselves a bit this way, or fans were doing it for them. I actually don't know the origins of this piece, but around when White Pony came out in the early 2000s, there was a piece of band art where it's like Chino and a woman making love in like a Kama Sutra art pose, and it was sold on like shirts, and there's a big flag of it, which now sells for like $400 online. It's like a collector's item.
Way out of budget.
I have one.
Oh my God.
I did not spend $400. It was $29.99 when I bought it, but I think it was a limited run item. But like they really leaned into it, and I don't think they were the ones who made that determination. It's one of these fan culture things that like uplifted the band. It's like, you're the sexy new metal band. And then they went, we are the sexy new metal band. But I don't think they ever actually did anything other than maybe that one piece of art to actually embrace that role. They just kept making the music they were always going to make. And the audience was always like, there's a sexiness to this heaviness. Right?
I like that they let that happen naturally. Like they kind of embrace in like a chill guy way, like whatever the fans are interpreting from them.
Yeah.
even now we see Gen Z kind of categorize Deftones as like the sexy band. Like you see thirst traps around the Fur tracks, or like White Pony especially, like Change being the most like a popular track on TikTok with almost 500,000 like posts overall, like with different sounds. When you listen to the music, you think, you know, like it's breathy, it's moany, it's distorted, kind of like it does create that hypnotic and like visceral allure. But like overall, like when you see them perform, or when you see kind of who they are, like I feel like it doesn't really match, but Gen Z has kind of like created the own aesthetic for them in a way.
Yeah, but I mean, what's the thing that makes the thing sexy, right? And it's the authenticity to what they're doing. And I think the fact that I believe that they are always just writing the record they want to write, which is, it's attractive of itself, that they're not like, I don't ever think when they're sitting down to write, they're making any choices for the audience. I think they're just putting out their album because they're not trying to be in any genre specifically. I think they're just combining their collective feelings and musical ability and putting it out into the world. And that's attractive.
Yeah, and
right?
it's making sexy albums apparently, because I found a study that support this. So it was conducted by Zip Health, and it's called Tuning into Intimacy: What Music Do People Prefer During Sex? And Deftones are the most popular metal band to listen to during sex. I think the study surveyed over 1,000 Americans and analyzed Spotify playlists with titles related to sexual activity. And Deftones not only ranked within its own genre, but ranked third overall, just behind The Weeknd and Kanye West, being the only metal band in the top 10.
I'm going to tell you what's more shocking than Deftones being at 3 is Kanye being 1?
I think so. Yeah. I don't know. Well,
Are y'all okay?
His older school hip hop stuff, I can kind of see
like
that.
Late Registration?
I don't know. I don't know.
Diamonds Are Forever.
Just Heartless playing in the background, like maybe, who knows. But I wonder if like when you were, I know you kind of talked about how like you weren't really focusing on the sexy aspect. I don't think Deftones was either. But when you were listening to Around the Fur at its time, like did you ever think that like that's kind of the vibe that the album would give?
Yes.
Okay.
I do think Around the Fur is a sexy album. And once I get into this breakdown of the full record, I think it kind of makes sense. I mean, we can start like at the cover of the album, which is quote unquote sexy, but in a very like conventional mid 90s way, where
Agreed.
Like it's a woman on the cover in a bathing suit, but the camera is like above her, and so you're looking down her top of her swimsuit from above, which is like a man standing over her view. That's exactly what that is. And so that the cover of the record is already kind of telling you, and this is the only record cover that's even remotely like this, is to some degree telling you sex is involved. The nature of it looks menacing. Like the cover is sexualized, but it's not sexy except in like this menacing dark way.
And I feel like the music and the lyrics kind of do match that overall.
So this is a thing that I found fascinating looking up a bit about this cover is it's not even what they really wanted to use. Chino's on the record saying he thinks the cover is horrible. But it's one of those things where the lyrical content and the aesthetic of the record actually fully matches the cover if you do a breakdown of what they're talking about, or at least the connective threads that the lyrics are about on the album, which this is one of those times where I'm going to be like, so I put this record on for the first time when I was, I don't know, 14, 15. I had to be around that age. Knowing what a few of the songs are about and, you know, never really actually doing a full deep dive into the lyrics. And some of the lyrics are really difficult to fully interpret because he is yelling, he's wheezing, he's moaning, he's got it all going on this record. But there are moments that are really clear. And so those are the things the ear gravitates towards. And you can kind of interpret, much as we've said in the earlier episodes, where you can kind of interpret the thing that you want about the parts you can catch. And that's one of the magical things about heavy music. But I think you actually miss a lot of the subtext or the overt things that the artist is telling you that these songs are about. And going back to this record now and actually going through the lyric sheet, again, for the first time in like 25 years, if I ever went through the lyric sheet of this record, I don't remember. I was like, oh, this record's about some things that I'm probably not a big fan of. I'm not a big fan of. And it actually made it really hard to enjoy after doing the really deep dive of it, because things that I may have been reading as critique or like satire, like there's an element to Chino's lyrics that I always thought were a bit tongue-in-cheek. And I actually think he's just earnestly saying them at points in this record that make me go, oh God, what have I been listening to for all these years?
That's what I felt like in terms of also just just knowing what he's saying, because I think, and this might be like embarrassing to admit, but going through the lyrics, like I was like, oh, like I have not been singing this. I think I've just kind of just been like wheezing and moaning along with Chino when I listen to the like.
Yeah, you vibe, you like wheeze along, and then it gets to the part you can be like,
the one word,
town. Right?
The one word I can just like bleh, like out loud. But then I just like go, like this is the first time I'm going through the lyrics and I'm like, wait, what is he actually talking about?
So now that we've set up the mystery, maybe it's time to go through this record piece by piece by piece here and kind of talk about what this record is actually about. There are a few songs that are about non sequitur things to this record. For example, the first track, My Own Summer. This track is about, and it's not really a metaphor, the sun being terrible and hot and wanting all the people to go away so you can chill in peace in the shade. Which, like,
okay,
how can we not relate? I'm a night person and I've always really respected, like, yeah, sun sucks.
He's like, it's really hard to be from Sacramento, California, guys. Like, it's so hard.
Well, in the summer it probably is. And then we get into the second track, which is titled Labia. And this is where the thread of the record really comes into play, which is like, this is at the end of, I think, Chino's first marriage. I think it was a marriage. I get the sense from this album, not a particularly healthy relationship. And so this song is about two people enabling each other to do terrible things like drugs and degrading one another. Third track, Mascara. This is about domestic violence and hating your wife, but also seeming to feel bad that she's unfortunate enough to be married to you.
See, like, I didn't know. Like, yeah. I'm vibing out here and, like, I don't know. I'm looking here, like, at verse 2. Like, I wrote down these notes, like, not even really knowing what it means because I was like, what is Chino talking about? Verse 2, I hate your tattoos. You have weak wrists, but I'll keep you.
Yeah.
Like, okay. I don't know. Like, it kind of, I don't want to say it ruined the album for me because I still will always love this album, but it just made it seem like, oh, it's so, like, not what it's been set up to be kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's what I got overall.
I partially agree, but he also has, like, the line is, like, it's a shame that you're married to me.
Yeah.
Like, he knows, but I don't think it's better that he knows.
Mm-hmm.
But I always read that in the way where he was being self-reflective, and I think he's saying it's a shame that you're married to me because I am married to you, which in reading it back, I was like, oh, this isn't as like introspective as I thought it was. And I think that's another trait that set Deftones apart from other nu metal acts, which is usually like, this is about screaming outward. You're the problem. You're the problem. There's parts in here where Chino goes, I am the problem. I have things I need to work through, but I'm in this reread, I'm not convinced that's the case. Track 4 is a nice detour. It's the title track, Around the Fur, and it's about seeing phony people for what they are. It's a critique of vanity. It's a critique of fashion, and it has an absolute banger drum beat that's kind of like electronic based, but it's all done analog. It's just Abe's amazing staccato kicks, and I don't think there's another song that actually sounds like this song anywhere. And if you pick one song to hear off this record that you maybe haven't heard from like the two singles that are actually popular, My Own Summer and Be Quiet and Drive, go listen to Around the Fur, because this is emblematic of the way Deftones sounded completely unique within nu metal and within all other music. It is like they transplanted the 80s into 1997 nu metal culture, but it does not sound like the 80s or 1997 nu metal.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very special track that I don't think has ever really been, like, nothing's come close to sounding like this. And it still really is only itself. Let's get to track 5, Rickets, which is about being a jerk and leaning into it. So it's very Fred Durst in the sense that, like, I am unapologetically going to do this stuff. But again, I do think there is a little bit of introspection on here. So the lyric that I selected from here is, I think too much, I feed too much, I'm gone too much, I stay too much, I snore too much, I'm bored too much, I ate too much, I'm way too much, too stuck up. You're probably right, but this time I don't want to listen. You're probably right, but this time I don't even care.
Yep.
Right? It's very similar to the I'm just going to stay here and always be the same, although he is outlining all the critiques of himself as indicated by his partner of, like, these are complaints I have about you, and he's like, you are correct.
I am all of these things.
I don't care, which is the most stuck in place thing, right? And this is the one glimmer of hope I have for the record, is that he's writing this down and sharing it with the world. Maybe he is working through it. And I would like to believe that over 25 years and all the lovely music that Deftones have made that still are very introspective and dealing with some really challenging emotional stuff, that he is using this therapeutically and he's not speaking literally about what a shitty dude he seems to be on this record. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I feel like just kind of the way you were talking about it earlier, like the way it's set up, like it is the first album where they're trying things differently and like mixing and merging things together. So maybe in that way that it's also like him kind of being like open, just like letting it all out. Right. So maybe just the first time that it's talked about, it does feel kind of like, oh, okay, is he thinking about it? Is he just admitting it? Is he a piece of shit? Is he actually wanting to be a better husband or
is
what?
Is he just
or whatnot?
an abusive guy?
Yeah, so maybe just like it's like the initial like novelty of kind of throwing it all out there with like trying new things is kind of how it's set up.
Yeah. Is it dialed up for the fiction of the genre
Perhaps,
as well?
yeah.
Like, because that's also a thing across all the genres of metal, like, especially when you get into death metal. It's all for a reason. Like the extreme stuff is doing something, but the fact that this is about domestic abuse in a lot of cases really makes it challenging to take as a fiction because it's coming from the abuser perspective.
That's true.
Right?
That's true.
I don't know. So anyway, we will continue further to Be Quiet and Drive, which is the other big single from this,
Huge.
Which was really popular and was in fact covered by in conjunction with Deftones, Incubus at the height of their radio popularity, and Adam Sandler of being Adam Sandler fame. Deftones is such the band that tons of famous people really love, and they continue to get these very strange promotional opportunities in pop culture, but never really hit the heights of the secret popularity that they have, even with these covers. And I think maybe part of that is like that dark appeal. I don't know, they're kind of like a musical red light district where you can't really put them on TV fully.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You gotta hide it
like
a bit.
You can, but when you do, it's like, I don't think they're supposed to be here. It's not quite polished enough.
It's like, am I allowed to look?
And it's not, yeah, exactly. Am I supposed to enjoy this?
No. This song too, Be Quiet and Drive Far Away, just to bring it back to kind of the TikTokification. It's really funny how a band will kind of get popular, and then this has also become the most mocked Deftones songs, like how quickly it changes. Because now if you say that you like this song, oh, you have TikTok taste. So that I find interesting. I feel like it's also like one of the most popular like Deftone tattoos among younger generations is the "It feels good to know you're mine, now drive me far." And there's a lot of like there's a lot of videos like couple trends where it'll be like a person kind of like by themselves, and then it's a slideshow, and the next one is like them and their like little gothy emo boyfriend all together being cute to those lyrics. Yeah,
so Deftones now has a collection of sexual driving in a car tracks, like Passenger off of White Pony is also this, and it's just straight up a BDSM in the car track. It is, I think, musically the better song, but I don't know, to say that Be Quiet and Drive is TikTok taste, it's just good.
That's what I'm saying.
So if you hear it on TikTok and you're like, damn, this is good, who cares?
You like have to like the worst song that someone like that an artist has made to be cool on TikTok.
Yeah.
And it's like you have to force yourself or lie about liking it, because if you like something that's objectively good in like a really weird way, like you've gone too far down the mainstream. But we're talking about Deftones, like mainstream in what way? A new metal band coming back in 2020? Like it's all confusing how like it's been interpreted
and again,
from our side.
There's a wall to the mainstreamness of Deftones anyway. For this to be one of the things that is in heavy circulation, despite the lack of on-air play that it has received over time. Like, it's not like Smooth Operator being in every movie in the 90s, right? And then going back and liking it. This is different. It's very organic, just because of the quality of the song, although Smooth Operator is a banger. So this song, Be Quiet and Drive, is about driving away, brackets, with a kidnapped person or a person you're having an affair with to escape your unhappy life.
Either or.
It's either or. I can't tell which one it is. But that's an addendum because Chino is selfish on this record, and the point is, drive me far, right? Take me away. Lotion is next. Still, it's a similar deal to the prior tracks of like wanting to discipline and control the other person in a relationship, but then also feeling terrible about it. He repeats a million times in this record, I feel sick. And one of my favorite things is that on Genius, the lyric site, one of the comments is highlighting I feel sick, and the comment says, I think Chino feels sick, which is, yeah, he doesn't feel good about it.
Just a guess. A really good guess.
Die the Flu, same as above. One of the lyrics I highlighted here is, now that I know you love me, thank God that you love it all. Again, very unhappy relationship. Track 9 here is a detour. Head Up is what the song is called. And this is one of the stronger tracks on the album, but it's like a deep cut. In terms of like, it's very nu metal. It's nu metal strong. The riff is very nu metal friendly. It's about the death of the stepson of the Max Cavalera, who was the lead of Sepultura and later Soulfly, takes its name from a lyric in this song. And this track is actually really interesting going back and listening to, because the stepson that this song is about died in a car accident, and the middle section now, I was about to say the back half of Deftones' career, but it's not. It's the middle section, now that I am an ancient pillar of sand, was really about dealing with the car accident that their bass player Chi Chang got into, and he was in a coma for about 5 years.
Oh my goodness.
And after that had happened, a lot of their songs and the couple records that happened after that were about that accident and Chi being in a coma and like the loss of a friend. And it's actually so interesting that before all that happened, that this creates this series of repeated themes across Deftones' discography that are just about the tragedy of loss, but in a very Deftones way, where you're punching against it. Like, yeah. And this also does something really interesting, which is like, this is a celebratory song. Like, it's not a funeral kind of song for this person that the band and their not bandmate, but their kind of their peer in nu metal lost. And it's celebratory. It's like a celebration of life using the nu metal aesthetic that we normally associate with just like Rage Against the System, blah, blah, blah. This is like being pissed together to show love to someone who's gone.
Community.
It's community, which we normally associate with like hardcore and punk. Deftones does it in nu metal, and
that's true.
It's not the only time they do it. I do think this is the best time they do it, but it's just, this is a really unique thread going back and listening to it with the full context and the whole history that the band has gone through. And so in retrospect, this used to be a high point of the record in 1997 for me, because it's like the biggest nu metal banger. So when I'm like 14 with big pants and just want to learn how to write music that goes hard, it's like, yeah, this is the best track on here. And now I'm like, well, this is really interesting. It's this legacy of turning tragedy into something cathartic and beautiful that I think helps make this record hold up. And then the last track is, I think, my favorite Deftones track all time still, probably because, given the subject matter of the record especially, they add a woman's voice to the track. Her name is Annalyn, and I think she's Abe Cunningham's wife. And she's excellent on the track. She's basically responding to the terrible things Chino is saying and thinking. And it makes the record come to life because you finally have someone in a state to respond to Chino. It's giving agency to a woman on the record to be like, you're stupid.
Yeah, after like everything he's kind of set up about himself.
And now, that said, he still gets to be the villain on the thing, and I'll go through the lyrics here as well, but I do think it actually makes the idea of the album resonate as art, as opposed to just Chino being able to vent about a relationship he's frustrated with, right? Okay, so the lyrics go. The first part's going to be Chino. Let me think. Annalyn, let you think about what? Him, about girls, her, and what else? Him, and money, and new clothes. And then she goes, and what do I get? He goes, 30 nights. And she's like, uh-huh. And he goes, of violence. And she's like, yeah. And sugar to love. And then the chorus is about pushing her over a railing, right? Which is the punctum on the thing, but because you have the woman's voice, to me it always felt like horror and tragedy of the violence, which made the record make sense as a critique. Going back now, I don't see it fully working, although I do think it does work on this track still. But I'm also going to have a hard time hating this track because aesthetically I always thought it was really beautiful. The way that it was written and just conceptually, I think it's great. But at the end of the day, going back through Around the Fur, my whole thing was thinking about, I couldn't help but think about Fred Durst on Significant Other and having to go, like, is the way Chino is writing about women on this record better or worse than what Fred Durst did back on Significant Other? Whereas this is about domestic abuse. In Significant Other, it's like pure objectification. You know, he has that line that's to the effect of the party starts when the chicks get naked, that kind of thing. And so is this record getting us somewhere better? Is it doing something better?
That's a good point. Honestly, this might be like a very like Gen Z lens that I'm looking through it to answer your question, but that is kind of how we see things. I feel like it's just as bad, but it gets pretty privilege. I think that because it's just like a bit better sounding or like it fits a different vibe, I think that sometimes when you're more focused on like, whoa, how cool this sounds and how like sexy and edgy this is, they can unfortunately get away with when it's just like directly at you in like a rap kind of like aggressive way, or at least like like overall like with the other records that we've seen together. So I feel like in a way it is kind of like you have pretty privilege. Like it's more liked, it's maybe not interpreted, because I too, like after reading these lyrics, like if it wasn't for this conversation that we're having where I'm hearing you say all these things, like even I'm having a moment where I'm like, oh my god, like he's been saying this whole time, like that's kind of messed up. But the whole time I'm not really focusing on that because I'm like, this sounds great.
You know, I think we've really bridged a gap here, the millennial Gen Z thing, because we wouldn't have called it pretty privilege, but I think our ability to kind of ignore a lot of what this record is actually about and just enjoy it and carry a record like this forward for like 27 years it's that. Aesthetically, it was doing something different, and so you're always going to kind of gravitate towards that part, especially in these genres where the lyrics do matter, but the essence of the lyrics matter more than the specifics in terms of how the audience is typically interpreting the music. The fact that some of it is unintelligible is a feature, but the flip side of that feature is that it lets you ignore some of the horror within. But again, I'm not even fully convinced that this isn't all just done as art, but there is a bigger question that I think is really important to be like, what is the extent of what these lyrics are doing? Is this someone revealing themselves to us, or is it them really playing up for the art, you know? And I don't know the answer. I hope Chino's a chill dude.
Yeah, he's just a chill guy.
All we can do is hope these days, I guess.
For real,
though.
Yeah. Very true.
Did you have any concluding feelings on Around the Fur?
I did want to add a couple things, actually, just to kind of talk some more shit, I guess, about my generation. I don't know. I feel like with this like album kind of being like moody and like sensual and part of this like alternative culture, I did want to like kind of add to the fact that I think, and I don't want to speak for any younger person who has like listened to this album and not done this like deep dive on the lyrics, but I feel like a lot of us are focused on the performance of it. And I would agree that my generation is very performative. It's like, it's dramatic, but that's kind of exactly what TikTok is about. And even Chino himself has talked about how he attributes his recent success to TikTok. It's alternative enough to feel edgy. It's popular enough to be recognizable, hated just enough to make liking it feel cool. Like it's kind of the perfect recipe for modern success. It's so interesting kind of having these conversations and like seeing the importance it held when it first came out and what it actually means, and just seeing how it's kind of been just turned into this like aesthetic mood board is just like super interesting. And I feel like a lot of younger people, I feel like they should get more into what these albums actually mean versus what they represent, because then you can actually get more into the messages of it. I thought that was interesting as a younger person being into the record.
I agree. It was I think important for me to actually have a moment where I went through the lyrics ever. And I'm pretty sure I'd never done it unless I went through like the lyric book when I was first like getting the record, when I went to the CD store and bought it back in the day. Right. But at that age, not equipped to interpret any of this in any meaningful way, and just, really latching on to like the shove it parts of My Own Summer and stuff. But I do think the thing that it represents, if you go outside of the depth of the lyric, I think that matters just as much, though, because the thing that it ends up standing for is the thing we have the communal discussion or relationship to the thing about, right? And then the mood board part, I do got to say, we weren't sharing all our stuff on MySpace, but like we had our room just decked out with lyric cutouts and band photos from magazines, and our big pants were on display. A lot of us put our band t-shirts when we bought them. We would just put them on our walls and invite all our friends over and be like, I want you to make sure you understand my mood. Like we had them too. It was just different.
I think it's really, really interesting that you bring that up, though. And it's important to this conversation because maybe it would have been different if TikTok had been a thing back then.
For sure.
Because I feel like at least to me, what you're still saying, like having your room match your aesthetic and having your friends in your big pants come over and, talk about the record, still somewhat feels private. And I feel like the thing with TikTok is like, TikTok is basically an experimental lab. You can post your music, your outfit, your room, a makeup tutorial, a product prototype, and instantly get feedback. Within that feedback is where you're like, oh, should I delve deeper? Should I make my pants more baggy? Like, you guys had to be like, not to speak for you, but I feel like you guys, it's like, I like this, so I'm going to do it, and it works. Mm-hmm. If I posted something and someone didn't like it, all of a sudden I don't want it anymore.
Yeah.
It feels like it kind of removes the like rawness from it. Like, you'll have kids born in 2006 like say, oh no, not my favorite Deftones record being TikTokified. I was trying to gatekeep it. And it's like, dude, it's literally Deftones. Like, what are you trying to gatekeep?
It belongs to the world.
It belongs to the world, and it belonged to the world. And I think that's the thing with these older bands coming back, not just in nu metal, but just like nostalgia as a whole, kind of having such an important cultural significance nowadays. Mm-hmm. Is like you get to reinterpret it as you get older, and depending on how old you were and how old you are now, you see things differently. And I feel like our generation is so in the beginning of this that maybe it'll take some time, but everything just feels so like commodified and commercialized when it comes to Deftones now.
There was always a product.
That's true. Maybe it's just the like displaying of it that I'm stuck on.
And maybe the end point of this is going back to, I don't ever think they were writing for their product, right? I think Deftones is always the Deftones project, and a lot of the members of the band do go on to do like different side projects, but they don't all sound like Deftones, but a lot of Chino's side projects are very like Deftones adjacent. Like they're never not aesthetically in that same area. And I don't think that's because it's like, this is what's making us money. I think Deftones is one of those acts that's like, by coincidence, just successful in doing the thing.
Yeah, and like, letting people like take it as it is.
Which is maybe the way it should be, but I'm used to say capitalism.
Always. It's always capitalism.
It's always capitalism, and always, I guess in the case of Deftones, sex sells, even if it's not what you're actually making.
Yep.
Thanks for listening to Sonic Subculture Season 1. This podcast is produced by Marc Lajeunesse and Safa Hachi in conjunction with the Media History Research Center at Concordia University in Montreal, Canada.